Hello, you guys. Welcome to episode 12 of the Crime with Kylie podcast. I'm so happy that you decided to tune in today. Now, today we're going to be talking about a case that kind of just wrapped up. Obviously, in 25 to 35 years, there will probably be another trial if these boys try to appeal their convictions. However, for the moment, Nohema Graber, a beloved Spanish teacher in her community of Fairfield, Iowa, has gotten some justice. Now, I've done a few short videos on Nohema's case on TikTok and on Instagram, but truly, I just want so many people to know her name, know her story, know how much of an amazing woman she was. Before I get into what kind of woman she was, and in case you don't already know, Nohema Graber was murdered by two of her high school students in 2021. It was a ruthless act, and I do not wish that fate upon anyone, let alone someone with such a sweet soul like herself. And also, before we fully dive into it, we will be discussing sensitive topics, we will be discussing murder, how it has impacted the community, and overall graphic content. But hopefully we can do it in a way that is respectful and in remembrance of her, because remember, these videos are more so for the victims than for the killers. Without further ado, grab your coffee or tea and let's get into it. Nohema Graber was 66 years old when her life was taken from her, and she was a prominent member of her community. Fairfield, Iowa is a relatively small and close-knit community. And so are a lot of towns in Iowa. I believe in 2021, Fairfield, Iowa had a population of a little under 10,000. And if you've ever been to Iowa or have lived there, you know it's one of those places where everyone knows everyone. And I say that because my husband, he was not born in Iowa, he was born in California, but he did live most of his life in Iowa, and that is how it was. And from all of the articles that I've read, videos I've watched from her past students and the people who loved her, that is exactly how Fairfield, Iowa was as well. Nohema was born in Jalapa, Veracruz, Mexico. She was born November 10th of 1954, so she would have turned 68 just a few days ago. And then in 1986, at the age of 32, she married her husband, Paul Graber. They were married on October 4th in Jalapa, Veracruz, Mexico. So for the first half of her life, that is where she lived. After Nohema graduated school, she then worked for 17 years as a flight attendant, and she was beyond impressive. On top of being a flight attendant, she also studied to be a commercial airline pilot, and she became one of the first women in Mexico to be able to fly commercial airline jets. Nohema absolutely loved to travel, and then she passed on her love of travel to her 3 children. And speaking of her children, she started having children in 1992 when her and her husband Paul moved to Fairfield, Iowa. It was in Fairfield, Iowa that she had 3 children, and she started getting really involved at the St. Mary's Catholic Church. Soon after she started going to St. Mary's Catholic Church, she started going every single day, and she became a really prominent member of her church and of her Hispanic community in Fairfield, Iowa. And Fairfield, Iowa did not start off having a big Hispanic community, so Nohema started growing the community, she started spreading love and making sure that they were all connected, and she just made everyone who she encountered feel loved and feel like they were wanted and needed and part of a community. She did not let anyone feel like an outsider. Now, even though Nohema had been a pilot and a flight attendant and she'd raised her children and she was going to mass every single day, she still wanted to be a part of her community more and do more with her life. So in her 50s, when her children were a little bit older, she decided to go get her degree in English, and then she also decided to get her teacher certification. Her first teaching job as a Spanish teacher was at Nohema High School, and she taught there until 2012. And then in 2012 is when she moved on to teach at Fairfield, Iowa High School. And when she started teaching at Fairfield High School, everyone loved her, from parents to students. She would get cards from her past students, appreciation gifts. And I know teachers often get appreciation gifts and things like that, but it seems like Nohema's students in particular, she made a huge impact on their lives, and they just loved her. Honestly, reading about it, it kind of reminds me of my French teacher in high school. His name was Mr. Osterman. He was amazing, but they just make such an impact on you that you're like, I need to go back. I need to thank them. They made something that I didn't think I could learn, or something that wasn't necessarily made enjoyable by many teachers. Super fun, exciting, welcoming, and easy. Another thing that Nohema really loved and prioritized was her health and being in nature. So every single day, without fail, she would go on a walk in Chautauqua Park. But sadly, it would be during one of her walks at Chautauqua Park on November 2nd of 2021 that her life would be ended. And her life was ended by two of her 16-year-old students just over a bad grade that she had given them. A bad grade that they had earned. Now, I've had people on TikTok and on Instagram on the shorter videos on this case be like, what? There is no way that they took her life over a grade. That is ridiculous. That is stupid. But is there actually any good reason to commit murder? Is there any good and valid reason to murder an innocent woman who never did anything to you? There's usually not. And maybe, or most definitely, the boys were messed up in the head. Not due to mental problems, but some people, as we've discovered with these cases, are just evil. Think Gertrude from the Sylvia Likens case. That woman was just pure evil, no justification. Sylvia was just an innocent girl living with her, helping around, doing chores, going to church. Sylvia did nothing wrong. And yet she was tortured to death. And I feel like there are some similarities here because 16, you're old enough to know not to commit murder. And yet, for whatever reason, just because the grade that Nohema gave them harmed the GPA, harmed their overall GPA, that was enough in their minds to justify murder. And when I say they, I'm mostly talking about Willard Miller because Willard Miller is the one who received the bad grade from her. And Willard Miller, who was 16 years old at the time, reportedly met with Nohema Graber after school in some time of late October of 2021. And he was apparently upset about it because it harmed his overall grade point average, which he was 16 years old at the time, so he was either a sophomore or a junior in high school. And honestly, even if it just harms your grade point average for one quarter or one semester, I don't know what was going on in his mind. But nonetheless, to Willard, receiving this bad grade and having it hurt his GPA was enough for him to plan a sick and sadistic attack on Nohema Graber. So he stalked her along with his friend Jeremy Goodale, who was also 16 years old, for around 2 weeks. This is what they admitted to. They followed her daily routine, and they found out that the one time that Nohema Graber was alone was when she went on her walks. And she would go on her walks after school around 4 o'clock p.m. And aside from the fact that this murder was in no way justified, these boys could not take a step or a look outside of themselves. Nohema Graber, not only was she helping her church, helping her other students, her ex-husband Paul Graber, had cancer, and she was his caretaker. He was dying, and she was doing all of these things and taking care of him and being there for him, loving him, supporting him. And you would think if these two boys followed her routine so closely that they would have known that. They would have seen how many people she was helping and how big of a hole in so many individuals they were going to leave by taking her life. But it was November 2nd of 2021, and just like usual at around 4 o'clock p.m., Nohema Graber pulled her car into the parking lot by Chautauqua Park. And during what should have been a peaceful and pleasant walk, the two boys ambushed her with baseball bats. Willard Miller reportedly ambushed her first and took her off of the trail out of view. And then it was Jeremy Goodale who delivered the final and deadly blows. Jeremy admitted to his role and his guilt in her murder this past week. And what I think is so weird about Jeremy Goodale is just why. He knew when he met up with Willard Miller that Willard had the intention of killing Miss Graber, and yet instead of saying, hey man, this has nothing to do with me, I'm good, or, I don't know, reporting it to the police or telling someone, Jeremy Goodale just went along with Willard Miller to go murder Miss Graber. And afterwards, they tried to conceal her body under a tarp and a wheelbarrow and some railroad ties. And they tried to take all the evidence that they could away from the scene. The two boys then took Miss Graber's car keys, hopped into her van, and drove off. And a huge part in this case is that witnesses at the park saw both boys in the front seats of her van driving away. And then the boys just later abandoned her van at the end of a rural road. Nohema's body was discovered the very next day, November 3rd of 2021, and the investigation quickly began. From the witness statements at Chautauqua Park who stated that they saw the two boys, to then another witness saw someone pushing a wheelbarrow down the road around midnight the night before the murder. So the two boys had actually brought the wheelbarrow with them to try to conceal her body. It wasn't just in the park. And another huge piece of evidence that came quickly was Snapchat history, actually. Snapchat chats, different things that were suspicious, location, as you know, snap maps. They could kind of see where the boys were, and I believe the incriminating Snapchats were from Jeremy Goodale. Jeremy quite literally admitted to people on Snapchat that him and Willard were the ones who murdered Nohema Graber and hid her body. And I have no idea why they would do this. I mean, you get that some killers do like to brag about what they've done, which kind of leads me to believe that they both are messed up somehow psychologically. I mean, it was premeditated, it was not an act of passion, it was not sudden, and then to just brag about it afterwards? I feel like they, for whatever reason, thought they weren't going to get caught. Additionally, on the note of Snapchat, Jeremy and Willard had also discussed how they surveyed Miss Graber, how they stalked her, how they watched her every single move on a daily basis to see when the perfect timing would be. So Jeremy was a lot more involved than they initially thought. Now, Willard Miller was the first one of the boys to be sentenced. He was sentenced this past July of 2023, and he was tried as an adult because Iowa state law, if you are like 16 or if you are a minor and you commit like a felony or a murder, you are instantly tried as an adult. However, because he's also a minor, everyone who's tried for a crime in Iowa that is a minor has to have the possibility of parole, or you get the chance of parole. So Willard Miller received a life sentence, but he has the possibility of parole after 35 years. Now, Jeremy Goodale wasn't sentenced until yesterday, November 15th of 2023, and he was the first one of the two boys to fully admit guilt, say what he'd done. However, his speech/apology, I'm going to let you guys listen to it, but right now, as I'm speaking, it is quite literally being torn apart in the TikTok comments. And a big part of that is one of the things he said was to Nohema Graber's family and loved ones, "I didn't know how this would impact you." And then he proceeded to more so cry at the parts where he was apologizing to his own family and kind of like imagining if someone in his family was murdered. It seemed like, because he talked about like how he would feel if this happened to like one of his family members or one of his loved ones. And it just, I don't know, he cries. Some people think it's authentic, some people not so much. Based off of the fact that Willard Miller was the main one with the motive, I really don't know why Jeremy Goodale, aside from maybe being an awful person, would have gone along with this. So whether or not he actually feels guilt about murdering Nohema Graber, or is just guilty and feels bad because he was caught and handed a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years, I personally don't know which one. I don't think any of us could know. That's on his heart, whether or not he meant it or not. But I will say a point that Nohema Graber's family made is if you're so apologetic and if you feel so bad, why are you having an attorney fight for you to get your sentence lessened? Like, why are you here today? Just take the maximum sentence, and like, obviously they're not going to be happy, but they're going to feel a lot more content with that. So, without further ado, here is Jeremy Goodale's apology.
I want to say I'm grateful for this chance to speak my piece. I offer my sincerest apologies to the Graber family, but I know my words will never be enough. I've had time to think on what to say, and I'm sorry, truly sorry. What I've taken can never be replaced. Every day I wish I could go back and stop myself, prevent this loss and this pain that I've caused everyone. Everyone in the community and outside of it, those closest to me and those closest to the Graber family, as well as the Graber family. I didn't know how taking Miss Graber's life would affect you. I can't comprehend losing a loved one in such an awful way. I'm sorry I didn't stop this from happening in the first place. I'm understanding now that Miss Graber meant so much to so many people. She was a support to the community and those close to her. And she was a caregiver to her family, to her children, and to her own husband. So sorry. Graber's friends and the members of her church, I'm truly sorry for what I've taken from you. I never stopped to consider the community. To everyone at Fairfield High School who felt unsafe, those who were scared, those who lost hope, I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm sorry how my actions have affected you. I want an apology to all my friends. I'm sorry for the stigma placed on you just for having known me. Zach, Habib, Zoe, and John, I didn't care. I didn't even know what this had done to you. And I'm sorry. And Dad, I'm sorry that I let you down in so many ways. Jackie and Sophia, you've given so much to me. I'm supposed to be helping you and Dominic right now, Jackie, but I can't. Instead, I've caused so much stress, and so much loss, and so much grief. And to all of my siblings, I took your little brother. And Dad, I took your son from you. 2 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life, and I take full responsibility for what I did. And today, as a young man, I can begin to pay for that. I can never give back what I've taken. But I hope that this situation doesn't end as tragically as it began, and that someday something positive can come from this tragedy.
Okay, so there was that. Honestly, I would love to know your guys' thoughts on it. If you're on YouTube, comment down below. If you're on Spotify, use the Q&A section, because even making a follow-up video, I think, on this apology alone would be interesting, because so many people are like, oh my gosh, that's one of the most sincerest, like, court apologies, and then other people are like, oh, he's only crying because he got caught, and he just feels bad for himself. So it's kind of interesting, especially considering that he wasn't the main one with motive. So I don't know, let me know. Also, because this was proven to be a premeditated murder, they were charged with murder in the first degree, and they were convicted of murder in the first degree, both Jeremy and Willard. Additionally, they also both pleaded guilty, and the victim impact statements in this case were absolutely heart-wrenching, and you can tell just by hearing Nohema Graber's family talk, especially her brother-in-law, the brother of Paul, that she was an absolute angel and that they're an angelic family, because her brother-in-law spoke to Jeremy Goodale just yesterday and said, I will pray for you every single day on your journey and that you find God. He said, I pray for your safety and for your salvation. And I feel like coming from him, especially the brother of Paul, someone who knew Nohema for such a long time, that to show that much forgiveness already is just, it's undeserved. Jeremy Goodale and Willard Miller do not deserve that forgiveness or grace, because even Nohema's brother-in-law, Paul's brother, also said that Nohema's murder kind of sped up Paul's passing. Paul passed away from cancer before the conviction was made, and Paul, despite having cancer, was still fighting for Nohema to get justice. Gosh, this case has been on my mind and heart since hearing about it, and just the amount of grace that her family members and her in-laws have, especially with these two boys. Additionally, the judge also told Jeremy that they think that Jeremy's more likely to rehabilitate back into society than Willard Miller, because Willard Miller was very stubborn about his involvement in the crime, and he didn't own up to his guilt. He didn't show any sincerity whatsoever. He did not apologize. There are so many reasons that the judge honestly felt that Jeremy Goodale will probably get parole in the next 25 years. Willard Miller also did not want to admit his guilt, and Jeremy Goodale ended up testifying against Willard Miller. So that is one of the factors that helped him get a possibility of parole after 25 years instead of after 35 years. Alright, you guys, thank you so much for sticking around until the end of the episode. I really appreciate it. Remember to check out the different polls so you could vote for the next episode topic either on here or on Instagram. Totally up to you, but I hope to see you for episode 13 of the Crime with Kylie podcast. Have an amazing rest of your week, and please keep Nohema Graber's family, friends, and community in your thoughts. Bye.